The stage was set in a hall brimming with tension. Bright white lights poured down onto polished wood, the kind of glare that makes every bead of sweat, every twitch of the mouth visible to millions watching at home. The cameras panned across a restless crowd, half holding their breath, half ready for fireworks. Everyone knew this debate had the potential to get ugly, but no one imagined just how ugly it would get. And then it happened. Karoline Leavitt leaned into her microphone, lips curling with disdain, and spat the words that froze the room: "Go back to India." The air cracked like thunder. Gasps erupted from the audience, followed by a stunned silence heavy enough to press on every chest. It wasn't just an insult, it was a line torn straight out of the darkest corners of American history, a line designed to wound, to belittle, to strip a man of belonging in the country he had served. The arrogance dripped in every syllable, the kind of arrogance that believes cruelty will be applauded. For a moment, the cameras caught Patel's face. He did not flinch. His eyes, calm and steady, betrayed nothing of the storm swirling in the room. But the audience shifted uneasily, some staring at their shoes, others glaring at Leavitt with disbelief. It was as if the entire hall realized at once that something sacred had been violated. Commentators at the back clutched their earpieces, whispering frantically to producers. Social feeds lit up in real time. Did she really just say that? Am I hearing this right? Shock turned to outrage before the moderators could even regain control. And yet, in the very center of this storm stood Patel, silent, composed, refusing to give Leavitt the satisfaction of a reaction. That silence, that stillness, carried more weight than any shouting match ever could. It was the silence of someone who understood the power of timing, of someone who knew the right words, when spoken, could shake an entire nation awake. The stage light seemed to flicker brighter, as if sensing the moment was teetering on the edge of history. Leavitt smirked, convinced she had landed the fatal blow. But in reality, she had just lit the fuse on her own undoing. Because what Kash Patel was about to say would not only defend his dignity, it would leave America speechless. But no one could have predicted how Patel would respond. The sting of those words did not end on that stage. They carried a venom that touched something far deeper than a single debate exchange. In America, "go back" has always been more than an insult, it is a weaponized phrase, one that countless immigrants, children of immigrants, and people of color have heard in schoolyards, workplaces, and neighborhoods. It is a reminder of exclusion, hurled like a stone at those who dared to believe that their story, too, belonged to this country. That's why, when Leavitt sneered them into the microphone, it wasn't only Patel she targeted, it was every American who has ever been told they don't belong. And the timing couldn't have been more combustible. America is at a crossroads, wrestling with questions of identity and belonging. Immigration isn't just a policy debate, it's a battlefield for the soul of the nation. Some see it as the story of renewal, the lifeblood that keeps the American experiment alive. Others paint it as a threat, a dilution, a wedge to divide neighbor against neighbor. In this climate, every word spoken by a politician carries the weight of centuries, and Leavitt's words landed like dynamite. Karoline Leavitt is no fringe figure whispering at the edges of politics. She has cultivated a growing platform, building her brand on sharp rhetoric, brash confidence, and a willingness to cross lines others hesitate to approach. To her supporters, she is unapologetic, fearless, unfiltered. But to her critics, she represents something far more dangerous, the normalization of prejudice, the glamorization of cruelty disguised as candor. Her rising influence makes her words sting not just for what they were, but for what they threaten to unleash across the broader culture. Against that backdrop stands Kash Patel, a man whose very life defies her dismissal. Son of immigrants, he rose not by stepping on others but by serving with integrity in government, law, and national security. His journey, marked by perseverance and sacrifice, mirrors the resilience that has kept America alive through every era of doubt. When Leavitt tried to erase him with a sentence, she underestimated what he symbolized. He was not just one man under attack. He was the living embodiment of a larger truth, that America is built by those who endure the insult and still give back, those who carry both pride in heritage and loyalty to the nation they call home. The insult hit like a spark, but Patel's presence turned it into a potential firestorm. Millions watching at home weren't just waiting to see if he would defend himself, they were waiting to see if dignity could triumph over mockery, if calm could overcome cruelty, if the ideals America claims to hold dear could still shine through the noise. And in that suspended silence after Leavitt's words, it became clear, this was bigger than politics, bigger than Patel versus Leavitt. This was about whether the country itself would allow exclusionary hate to stand unchallenged, or whether someone could transform it into a moment of unifying power. Everyone leaned forward. The moderators shifted nervously. The audience held its breath. Because what came next wouldn't just shift the debate, it would echo across the nation. Karoline Leavitt did not stumble onto that debate stage by accident. She came armed with the reputation she had been building for years, brash, ambitious, and unapologetically combative. To her supporters, this was her strength, a refusal to play by the rules of politeness, a sharp tongue that cut through political doublespeak. To her critics, it was recklessness dressed up as courage, a calculated performance of outrage designed to generate headlines and consolidate power in a climate addicted to conflict. Her rise was meteoric. Young, sharp-featured, and media-savvy, Leavitt had mastered the art of social media provocation. One fiery post, one clipped soundbite, and her name would ricochet across news cycles. She understood the modern marketplace of attention better than most seasoned politicians. Outrage sells. And she sold it with a smile. On television, she projected charm, a kind of almost girlish enthusiasm for the fight. But behind closed doors, those who knew her described a different Leavitt, sharp-elbowed, dismissive, hungry not for service but for spectacle. That hunger fueled her. Every insult, every provocation was strategic. She had learned that controversy built brand loyalty, that her name trending on Twitter, whether in admiration or disgust, was better than fading into obscurity. Each inflammatory remark was a spark tossed into dry brush, and she relished the flames it produced. Her arrogance was not hidden, it was her weapon. But with that arrogance came overconfidence. Leavitt's strategy thrived on pushing the boundaries further each time, daring audiences to gasp and adversaries to recoil. Where others would hesitate, she lunged. Where others worried about consequences, she saw opportunity. It was this very bravado that brought her to the brink of power, and it was the same bravado that blinded her to its limits. Her history was littered with remarks that stung communities across America. Immigrant families remembered her dismissals of hyphenated identities. Activists recalled her mocking of those who demanded dignity. Even some within her own party winced at her rhetoric, whispering that she was playing with fire. But for Leavitt, fire was the point. She believed she could tame it, that she could walk through the flames unscathed. She carried herself on stage that night as though the debate were a coronation, not a contest. The cameras adored her confidence, the smirk, the carefully rehearsed lines meant to slice at her opponent. And when she leaned forward to deliver, "Go back to India," she did it with the same conviction she had always relied on, the belief that cruelty would win her applause, that spectacle would once again turn into advantage. But there was a difference this time, a miscalculation buried beneath her certainty. In Patel, she did not face a typical adversary. He was not a man easily rattled, nor was he someone who played the outrage game on her terms. He was calm where she was reckless, steady where she was volatile. She expected him to stumble, to fight anger with anger. Instead, his composure made her words echo louder, exposing their ugliness in full daylight. And outside that hall, beyond the stage lights and the partisan chatter, millions of Americans were watching with hearts in their throats. For them, her insult was not clever. It was not bold. It was cruel, familiar, and profoundly out of step with the dignity they still hoped politics could embody. In trying to diminish Patel, she had accidentally amplified him. In trying to strip him of belonging, she had reminded millions why his story mattered. Leavitt had spent her career cultivating an image of fearlessness, of dominance, of never backing down. But she failed to recognize that dominance built on disdain can only last so long before it collapses under its own weight. And on that night, under those lights, her smirk would not signal victory, it would mark the beginning of her unraveling. Because her words that night would become the very weapon that unraveled her own image. Long before he ever stepped under the burning glare of debate stage lights, Kash Patel carried with him the story of millions, the story of those who came to this country not with guarantees, but with grit. His parents arrived in America from India with little more than determination stitched into their hearts. They worked long hours, sacrificed comfort, and poured their lives into giving their children the chance to dream bigger than they ever could. The Patel household was not a place of privilege, it was a place of persistence. Homework was done at kitchen tables crowded with bills, meals were modest, and nothing came without effort. But within that modest life was something extraordinary, an unwavering belief that America rewards hard work and that service to others is the truest form of patriotism. Kash grew up straddling two worlds. In one, he carried the customs, language, and traditions of his parents' homeland. In the other, he walked the hallways of American schools, often reminded by classmates that he looked or sounded different. He knew the sting of sideways glances, of whispered jokes about his last name, of teachers mispronouncing it year after year. But he also knew the power of resilience. His parents reminded him constantly, adversity does not define you, your response to it does. That lesson became his compass. He worked his way into higher education, into law, into the tough, often thankless world of government service. He entered rooms where few looked like him, where doubt trailed behind him, but each time he silenced it not with loudness, but with competence, with preparation, with the quiet strength of someone who knew he belonged because he had earned his place. Patel served as a prosecutor, an advisor, a public servant in matters of national security, roles where integrity is not optional but essential. Every step of the way, he carried the weight of his family's sacrifices on his shoulders, determined to prove that their journey was not in vain. What made Patel stand out was not firebrand rhetoric or thirst for headlines. It was his calm. In hearings, in interviews, in the crucible of politics, he rarely raised his voice. He let facts do the heavy lifting. He let composure disarm those who expected volatility. He built a reputation not as a bomb thrower, but as someone who, even in the eye of the storm, radiated steadiness. In an era where political theater thrived on shouting matches, Patel was something rarer, a man who understood that true power is often found in silence before the storm. That silence came from a deeper source, gratitude. For Patel, America was not perfect, but it was promise. It was the land that had given his immigrant parents the chance to build, to contribute, to belong. His belief in the American dream wasn't abstract, it was personal. He lived it. And that belief gave him resilience that few could rattle. Insults, prejudice, attempts to question his place in this nation, they were not new. He had heard versions of them since boyhood. But each time, instead of bowing under them, he had used them to stand taller. This is what set him apart from Leavitt and others like her. Where they thrived on division, he thrived on service. Where they sought applause from cruelty, he sought purpose in justice. He embodied the very idea that America is at its strongest when it welcomes, not when it excludes. And because of this, millions watching him saw more than a man under attack, they saw the American dream under fire, and they were desperate to see if it could rise above the insult. Patel was not naive. He knew the battles of politics were brutal. He knew prejudice could sting sharper when it came wrapped in the legitimacy of a debate stage. But he also knew that those moments were opportunities, chances to prove, again and again, that dignity is the one weapon hate cannot blunt. And so, when the insult came, Patel was ready in a way no one expected. The room had not yet recovered from the initial shock when Karoline Leavitt decided to press her advantage. She could feel the eyes on her, the hush of disbelief, and mistook it for control. With the same smirk curling her lips, she leaned back into the microphone, her voice sharp, clipped, dismissive. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," she declared, her tone dripping with self-assurance. "This is America. We shouldn't have to take lectures from someone whose loyalty is clearly divided." Gasps again. A few scattered claps from the fringe corners of the audience. But the dominant sound was silence, the stunned, unsettled silence of people who weren't sure if they had just witnessed politics or a line being crossed so deeply it could never be undone. The cameras captured it all, Leavitt's dismissive shrug, Patel's steady expression, the audience members whispering to each other in disbelief. Commentators at the back of the hall scribbled furiously, already predicting the headlines. Producers barked in earpieces for close-up shots. Social feeds pulsed like a heartbeat, outrage and disbelief pouring in faster than moderators could manage. Leavitt, emboldened by her own audacity, doubled down further. "If you love this country so much," she sneered, "then prove it. Because right now, all I see is someone who doesn't understand real America." Her words hung in the air like poison, corrosive and heavy. But through it all, Patel did not flinch. He didn't match her tone. He didn't roll his eyes or interrupt. He sat with the calm of a man who knew that storms burn themselves out, that patience can be the sharpest blade. His hands remained still, folded in front of him, his eyes locked on hers not with anger, but with a kind of quiet pity. It was as if he saw her not as an adversary, but as someone too blinded by arrogance to realize the damage she was inflicting on herself. That composure unnerved her. She expected him to stumble, to stammer, to lash out in wounded anger. Instead, the contrast was brutal, her loudness against his silence, her arrogance against his dignity. The audience began to shift in their seats, many of them no longer looking at Leavitt but at Patel, waiting. Waiting to see if the man who had been told to leave America would rise with the America they still believed in. The cameras caught the moderators' anxious faces. One cleared his throat, ready to intervene, but stopped when he saw Patel's expression. Something was building behind those calm eyes. Not rage. Not vengeance. Something stronger, truth waiting to be delivered at exactly the right moment. The crowd sensed it too. The restless whispers died down. The tension in the room tightened like a string pulled taut. All around, the stage lights shimmered, the microphones hummed, and the nation seemed to lean in closer. And then, with the room holding its breath, Patel leaned forward. Patel's chair creaked as he shifted forward, hands still folded, eyes steady on Leavitt. The pause was long, long enough for the audience to lean in, long enough for the moderators to hesitate, long enough for Leavitt's smirk to twitch into something more uncertain. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, measured, deliberate. "You just told me to go back to India." The words echoed through the hall, not as a question, not as outrage, but as a statement of fact. The audience erupted with gasps. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of his expression, calm, resolute, almost sorrowful. Patel let the silence stretch a moment longer, refusing to let the gravity of her insult be washed away by the churn of political sparring. "I was born here," he continued, his voice gaining quiet strength, "and even if I hadn't been, this nation was built by people who came here from somewhere else. People who worked, sacrificed, and believed that America was worth giving everything for. My parents came here with nothing but hope and determination. They raised me to serve, to give back, to honor the country that gave us a chance." A ripple of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling as more in the audience joined. Patel did not raise his hand to quiet them, he allowed it, knowing each clap was an indictment of her cruelty. He turned slightly toward the crowd before locking eyes with Leavitt again. "You say I don't understand real America." His tone sharpened, not in anger but in conviction. "Real America is not about the color of your skin. Real America is not about the country your parents came from. Real America is about service. About dignity. About believing in something bigger than yourself." The applause thundered louder now, and even the moderators glanced at each other with widened eyes. Leavitt shifted in her seat, her smile faltering as she realized the ground was slipping beneath her feet. Patel pressed on, his cadence building like a trial lawyer dismantling a witness. "My story is not divided loyalty. It is the opposite. It is proof of what America is supposed to stand for. That anyone, from anywhere, can give their best to this country and call it home. That our worth is not defined by where we were born, but by what we contribute. And I will never apologize for serving America with every ounce of my strength. The crowd erupted, some on their feet, cheers mixing with applause so loud it drowned out the microphones. Leavitt fidgeted, her eyes darting toward the moderators for rescue, but none came. She had set the fire, and now Patel was walking through the flames untouched. Patel waited, let the applause crest, then dropped his final blow with precision. He leaned closer to the microphone, his voice steady, piercing. So let me be very clear. You don't get to tell me to go back anywhere. I am home. I am American. And the only people who don't understand real America are those who think belonging depends on ancestry instead of service. The hall exploded. Thunderous applause, cheers, even a chant beginning to form at the back, USA. USA. The camera cut to audience members wiping away tears, others shaking their heads in awe. Patel sat back, calm once more, the storm spent, his point seared into the nation's memory. Leavitt tried to interject, her voice strained, brittle. This is political theater. But her words were swallowed by the roar of the crowd. She attempted a smile, but the veneer cracked, the confidence that had carried her into the debate now looked like desperation. Patel said nothing further. He didn't need to. The silence that followed his mic drop was louder than any retort she could muster. The moderators struggled to regain control, fumbling for the next question, but the moment had already transcended the debate. It wasn't about policy anymore. It wasn't about politics. It was about America watching a man, once told to leave, remind everyone why he had every right to stay. That moment burned across screens, etched into memory. People at home clutched their phones, recording, replaying, sharing. It was more than a comeback. It was a declaration. A reclaiming of dignity, wrapped in patriotism so undeniable that even critics would struggle to twist it. Patel leaned back in his chair, hands still folded, eyes forward. He didn't gloat. He didn't grin. He let the truth hang in the air like a verdict delivered. The room, the stage, the country, none would be the same. Because what happened in the minutes after sent shockwaves far beyond the stage. The moment Patel leaned back in his chair, the echo of his words still hanging in the air, the debate stage became secondary. The real battlefield shifted instantly to living rooms, phones, and feeds across America. Within seconds, clips of his takedown flooded social media. One short video, Patel declaring, "I am home. I am American." Ripped across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, spreading like wildfire. The hashtags came first. Hashtag Patel for America climbed into trending territory before the moderators had even moved to the next question. Hashtag Dignity Wins followed, bolstered by memes of Patel calmly facing Leavitt's sneer, side by side with captions like, "Grace Under Fire," and "This is Real America." Supporters latched onto the imagery, Patel, unshaken, speaking truth while Leavitt's smirk dissolved. It became the symbol of composure beating cruelty, dignity eclipsing division. Then came the reaction videos. Influencers with millions of followers recorded themselves watching the clip in real time, gasping, clapping, some even tearing up. A popular TikTok creator replayed Patel's final line, adding text across the screen, "This belongs in every history book." The post hit 1 million views in hours. Celebrities weighed in on Twitter, actors, athletes, musicians, calling Patel's response, "the line of the decade, a true mic drop, the America I believe in." Even political rivals begrudgingly admitted on air that it was one of the most powerful comebacks ever delivered on a debate stage. Commentators scrambled. Cable networks looped the clip endlessly, panels of pundits dissecting Patel's delivery, his composure, his refusal to take the bait. Some conservative voices tried to spin it as overreaction, but their soundbites fell flat against the tidal wave of praise. In contrast, progressive commentators seized the moment, framing Patel's words as not just a personal victory, but a cultural turning point. One anchor declared, in a single response, Patel redefined what patriotism looks like in the 21st century. The ripple effects reached every corner of the political spectrum. Immigrant families shared the clip at dinner tables, telling their children, "This is why we're here. This is what we mean when we say never be ashamed." Community leaders replayed it at gatherings, calling it proof that dignity still has power in American politics. College students clipped it into speeches and presentations, making Patel a symbol of resilience for a generation weary of division. Even teachers reported showing the video in classrooms, holding it up as an example of courage under pressure. Meanwhile, Leavitt's camp faltered. Her supporters tried to mount defenses online, insisting she was just being honest, but their posts drowned under the flood of derision. Memes mocking her smirk spread just as quickly as Patel's triumph, often captioned with words like, "the face of defeat," or, "when cruelty backfires." What she had intended as a knockout punch had turned into her own undoing, not just in that hall, but in the court of public opinion. And Patel? He stayed silent on social media that night. No self-congratulations, no victory laps. That restraint only amplified the effect. Commentators praised him for letting the moment breathe, for understanding that the power of his words needed no embellishment. In an age where everyone rushes to post first, Patel's silence read as humility, dignity, even wisdom. By morning, the story had become inescapable. News outlets plastered it across their front pages. Late-night hosts opened with monologues about it. Editorials described Patel's remarks as the clearest moral compass heard in modern politics. Across the country, Americans who felt weary and invisible found themselves standing taller, comforted by the fact that someone had spoken for them, not with anger, but with honor. The insult had been cruel, but the response transformed it into something larger, a rallying cry, a reminder of what America could still be. And yet, even as the nation buzzed with clips, commentary, and hashtags, the real weight of Patel's words had only begun to take shape. Because the real power of Patel's words was only revealed days later. What made Patel's words reverberate so powerfully was not just the sharpness of his rebuttal, but the transformation it carried. An insult meant to reduce him, to strip him of belonging, was alchemized into a universal declaration of dignity. He had turned a wound into a weapon, not by lashing out, but by reminding America of itself. In those few sentences, Patel reframed the entire debate. America was not about exclusion, not about ancestry, not about drawing lines of who belongs and who doesn't. It was about service. It was about values. It was about the quiet, everyday acts of sacrifice and perseverance that immigrants, workers, soldiers, and families give to this nation, often without recognition. By rooting his response in service, Patel tapped into a truth deeper than politics. The American identity is not inherited, it is earned through commitment, through contribution, through love of country. And that is why it struck so many as undeniable. His answer was not only about him. It was about every person who has ever been told they didn't belong, who has ever been made to feel like an outsider in the place they call home. Patel's poise, his refusal to return hate with hate, gave those people something they had been craving, validation. He showed them that dignity is not weakness. Dignity is power. Commentators began to note the difference. This wasn't a clapback, one columnist wrote. It was a moral lesson. Others called it a blueprint for how to counter prejudice, not with fury, not with despair, but with a confidence that transforms hate into irrelevance. Patel's calmness had not just neutralized Leavitt's insult, it had reversed it, making her words look small, petty, beneath the level of the debate. The crescendo of admiration wasn't simply about a win on a stage. It was about hope. In an age of constant shouting matches and endless division, Patel reminded people that there is still room for grace, for composure, for the kind of courage that doesn't need to roar to be heard. His words became more than a viral moment, they became a North Star, a reminder that America still has the capacity to rise above bitterness. In the weeks that followed, echoes of his response could be found everywhere, quoted at rallies, posted on church bulletin boards, taped to the walls of classrooms. His defiance, framed not in anger but in principle, gave a new vocabulary to those who had grown tired of fighting prejudice on its terms. Instead of arguing, Patel had lifted the conversation to a higher plane. What does it mean to be American? And his answer resonated. America is not about exclusion. It is not about telling people to leave. It is about honoring those who give, who serve, who uphold the promise of freedom even when it falters. Patel reminded the nation that belonging is not defined by bloodlines, but by the willingness to stand tall in service to something greater. That is why his words did not fade into the noise of 100 other soundbites. They lingered, etched into memory, carried forward by those who wanted to believe that decency still mattered. Dignity had triumphed over hate. And yet, even as the applause quieted and the headlines shifted, the moment refused to die. It stood as a testament not just to Patel's resilience, but to America's unfinished story. Because moments like this remind us, the story of America is still being written. Karoline Leavitt's insult may have echoed with hate, but Kash Patel's response echoed with America. What began as an attempt to diminish him instead elevated a truth far greater than either candidate on that stage. Patel's words reminded the nation that dignity is stronger than cruelty, that service is more powerful than prejudice, and that the American story is not written by those who try to exclude, but by those who choose to belong through love, sacrifice, and contribution. This was not just a debate moment. It was a mirror held up to the country. And in that reflection, millions saw themselves, their families, their struggles, their worth. They saw that insults can be met not with shame, but with pride, not with silence, but with clarity. In Patel's steady voice, they heard the echo of their own stories, the proof that America is still capable of living up to its promise. And now, that story is in your hands. Because these moments only live as long as people carry them forward. If Patel's response moved you, if it stirred something inside you, don't let it fade into the noise. Share it. Tell others. Be part of amplifying dignity over hate, truth over arrogance, hope over division. Subscribe to this channel, join this community, and add your voice to a growing movement that refuses to let smallness define us. Because this isn't just Patel's story, it's ours. And the more we share it, the more we ensure that voices of dignity are never drowned out by voices of hate. The insult may have sparked outrage, but the response sparked something far greater, belief. Belief in each other, belief in our country, belief in the unfinished story we are still writing, together.